Monday night here on the East Coast, and what is it? 4 o'clock on the left coast. For those who are joining us over from the other side, of course, 12-hour difference over in overseas. So if you guys are watching us here live on broadstsouth.com, listening to us live on Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game, and obviously over on YouTube, we do appreciate it. It is Lloyd Vance's Insider Football right here on Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game. And lots to get into as we have a contract restructuring, which should be interesting for Ryan's Chiefs. And I don't even call it the KC Chiefs anymore, so it'll be Ryan's Chiefs. That'll be an interesting take. Also, Saquon Barkley could be missing out some time. We also had a concussion protocol yesterday in the NFL with the Indy Colts. So lots to get into as it'll be a great night for football. Also, the Saints will be playing a little bit later on, so we'll get the guys' take on what they believe and who they will believe will end up winning. And obviously the Eagles will be playing next Monday night, but we're going to start with week 2 because we have 2 more games left here in week 2 before we get everything going. So with that all being said, we thank you all for tuning in tonight. Once again on Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game and right here live with us. And am I missing? I am missing something. I surely am. Give me 1 second as I am missing something. Oh boy. See, again, this is the beauty of, you know what? I'll have to bring it back up later on. Yeah, well, yeah, I have to bring it back on later on. Or as a matter of fact, no, I have to bring it back up later on. Oh boy. Something that was amiss. And well, anyways, I have to bring it back because what ended up happening is that I bring the guys in live. I did have the intro for the show, and what do? It was a long weekend. That's all I got to say. It was a long weekend. So I will probably exit out. I'll have you guys talk for a minute, and then hopefully I'll be able to get it up where I need it to be. So anyways, just because it is what it is Lloyd Vance joining us here on a Monday night. Of course, it is the Monday night version of the pregame football. And then Ryan Neff over from Hollywood, California, a.k.a. Pennsylvania, because, again, it's going to be one of those things that he might be looking for a new team. And by the way, as I start the evening off, this might be the last night for Lloyd because we believe that the Jets will be hunting for a new quarterback. And from what I understand, Lloyd back in the day has thrown over 7,000 yards back in high school. So he still has it. But either way, it is Lloyd. It is Ryan. Fellas, how are you this evening?
We're doing good. I wasn't a quarterback. I was a lineman. I knew a lot of quarterbacks though from my work on the book Third to Mile, and they surely would not be calling me. I do believe that the Jets, this is Dallas beat them thoroughly. It was 30-10, and I don't get my lackey out until back at play on Tuesday, but it's sure looking like it's Zach Wilson, and it's a situation where you wonder is he the guy for them to go with, but they got to run the football first and foremost, and lean on that running game, and those 2 very good running backs that they have. Obviously, Dalvin Cook had that very bad fumble, and that kind of turned that game around. But it just was not competitive for them. And whether it's Tim Boyle who's on a roster or they go to Matt Ryan or whoever, they need a new quarterback.
Yeah, I'm Ryan Neff. It's great to be with everybody. Yesterday sort of had a little bit. It was like a playoff feel yesterday for some of the games. It just had that feel to it, And then talking about the Jets, Lloyd, look, the Cowboys had the ball for almost 43 minutes of that football game offensively. The Jets had it less than 18 minutes. And the thing of it is, if you can't sustain drives and you keep putting your defense back on the field, the defense is eventually going to wear it down. And the thing with Wilson is, when you're playing from behind and your defense is trying to do like what it's trying to do, can I fault Zach Wilson for the first 3 quarters? No, it wasn't on him. But that last quarter playing from behind, not a lot of reps, do I think he should have thrown 3 interceptions? No, because he has to make better reads. But at the same time, when you're playing from behind and you're trying to make play and you think you have to make every play, the Cowboys just force the mistakes. So I don't think they're going to replace Zach Wilson. I see it all over social media, and they beat the Bills. Oh, we're going to be fine. Then yesterday, everything goes to hell in a handbasket, and we're done. Ryan Clark and Damian Woody from ESPN were on Get Up this morning, and both of them were like, it's over. They're not going anywhere. They're in the same They're in the same position they were last year. It's just a part of the NFL. Injuries happen. I said last week they should make a call to Matt Ryan. I'm not saying Matt Ryan's going to take him to a Super Bowl, but Matt Ryan right now is a whole hell of a lot better than what Zach Wilson is. So, we'll just have to see.
Yeah, and it's a situation. It's a situation where they this division is competitive. They're 1-1. Obviously, Buffalo Bills are 1-1. Is not bad sentence. Their teams last year that made it from 1-1. They're not 0-2 because we know 0-2 is a you might 0-2. That's not a good spot to be in. 4 teams were 0-2 last year. Only Cincinnati made it, and only 31 of 270 teams since 1990 have come back from 0-2 to make the playoffs. So we've seen this happen before, and it's on Wilson. He came out with that first round pedigree, and they're going to have to figure out a way to get him to protect the football first and foremost, and then kind of go from there. But that defense is very good, and Dallas they scored 5 field goals. Everybody's talking about how dominant the Cowboys are. Once again, they've outscored their opponents 70-10 over their first 2 games, and everybody's all excited about them pounding their chest. There's a lot of Dallas fans in the Philadelphia area that I always hear from, but this season's a long one. It's a 17-game marathon, and we'll see these things shake out. Salah's on a hot seat. The last couple of years, he was 12 and 22 his first 2 seasons, and he's got to turn this thing around. They have not been to the playoffs since 2013, the Jets. So a lot of work to do there. It was a tough situation for them to go on the road and beat Dallas. But I'm looking at the Jets' schedule. They have New England this week, and they play Belichick. That's always very interesting, him playing. I know he's only a coach for a day, but they're going to go against Belichick, and that should be a good battle between 2 teams. Then they have to play Kansas City, at Denver. Then they have Philadelphia, and then they have their bye. So, it doesn't get any easier for the Jets. And, yes, all eyes up in New York will be on Zach Wilson.
And here's the other thing, just real quick.
Sure.
How the hell is Zach Wilson your leading rusher with 5 carries for 36 yards? You have Breece Hall. You have Dalvin Cook. You have Michael Carter. I mean, for the love of God. 11 rushes. Breece Hall carried the ball 4 times yesterday. That is on the coaching staff. You can't expect to run the ball 16 times for 64 yards and expect to win the game. That puts even more pressure on Zach Wilson. So you can't blame it all on Zach. I mean, some of it has to go, the onus has to go to the coaching staff. That's a horrible game plan.
Nathaniel Hackett, he's looking like the guy who was in Denver last year. Aaron Rodgers wanted his guy, and we know Rodgers is in there to work with him. But Hackett's got to do a better job in terms of spreading the football around. They did have that nice long TD pass to Wilson, and that was nice and got some things going. But, they just got to spread that around. And I think if they lean on that running game and then allow the defense to produce timely turnovers, maybe take one to the house, special teams, that will help them. So, this team's got some work to do.
That Dino, and I'm going to do a reset here for a second because I want to make sure that I bring this in because I want to make sure I do right by Lloyd here. So if you guys missed in the very beginning, there was a little bit of a technical glitch. So with that being said, here is what should have been right after and before the guys end up joining in.
all good.
So what it should have been in the very beginning, I want to make sure I brought it in there because again, listen, it happens. I say it every day. Things happen when you go live, and just we try to make things straight around here. But either way, that was the actual intro here. That will be the intro coming in every single week. If you guys are just tuning in, it is live here on Sports Radio 102.9 FM. The Game, Lloyd Vance's Insider Football, of course, right here with Lloyd Vance himself. And as we talk a little bit about as far as injuries, obviously, Aaron Rodgers being out, Zach Wilson, we had just talked about it momentarily as well. And I guess what we see on the injury circuit, the New York Giants talked about their running back, Saquon Barkley, suffered an ankle sprain, and the test revealed that he will miss at least Thursday and considered week to week. So, Lloyd, it seems, and I know Ryan and I were going back and forth yesterday with text messages, but I feel really bad for Saquon because he's just very, very injury prone. And a lot of stuff, like Ryan had told me yesterday, is a lot of freakish stuff that ends up happening to him. And I know the Giants, obviously, this year did not want to go all in on Saquon. And this is kind of one of the reasons why. Is his career, and it's bad to say, but is it coming to a close?
No, I wouldn't say it's coming to a close, but we just know that the running back position has been devalued around the National Football League ever since Todd Gurley got that big contract from the Rams and did not live up to it. And they're always going to come in, they're not going to get paid more than $15 million a year. It's just such a demanding physical position. And when you look at Saquon, yes, he's catching the football a lot. He's running it between tackles and he's getting hit very often. He's still a young back, and they decided to franchise him, which is their right to, under the collective bargaining agreement. And the thing is, he did not like it, and he wants to be paid commensurate to, some of the receivers out there, and they see the quarterbacks making, Dan Jones' quarterback is making $45 million plus a season, and he thinks he's the most important part of that team. So, I think it was frustrating to see him with that ankle injury, and I know he wants to get back out there and prove himself. It's a prove it season for him. But I think eventually he's probably going to end up somewhere else because that's just the way it is with running backs, and somebody's going to have to pay them eventually. But it won't be the value that they want. Look at what happened this year with Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook was out there and shopped himself around, and then he ended up on kind of a value deal with the New York Jets.
I will say this about the whole Saquon situation. They devalue the running back right now, but there was a theme yesterday in all these games, and I think there was only 2 or 3 teams that did not win. Like the Giants were one of them, but they won. All the other teams that won yesterday, they ran the football and they had in yardage and carries. So we can devalue the running back position all we want to, but if you get deep into the season and deep into the playoffs, and Lloyd, you know this, if you can't run the football deep into December and January and into February, you're not going anywhere. And with Saquon I thought that he should have left last year. They paid Daniel Jones. He's injury prone. I don't know what it is, if it's a turf thing that he gets injured on, but yesterday was just a freak thing. So he's going to come back this season, obviously. But I think once this season is complete, like Lloyd said, I don't think he's going to be with the Giants after this year. He wants to win. His window is closing, especially with all the injuries that he's had. And I just think that after this season, he's gone. He's somewhere else.
Yeah, and when you look at the NFL's a passing league first. We know that there were like 10 quarterbacks that threw for over 4,000 yards last year, and every team wants that quarterback. They want the receiver. They obviously want that left tackle to protect their high-priced quarterback, and then they want the edge rusher to kind of get after the quarterback. So, the running back is just down on the list. We also know that safety is also down on the list in terms of who's getting paid the highest at first. And I just don't see that changing. These running backs had their big conference call during the offseason trying to, say, we need to bring back the running back. Well, it's just the game has changed so much since the 70s, the 80s, and 90s when you built your team around that back like Emmitt Smith was for the Dallas Cowboys. He was their engine, but it's just backs are kind of like teams are going to use a stable running backs. Look at the Philadelphia Eagles. They have They have Penny, they have Swift, they have Gainwell, they have Boston Scott, and they're going to spread these carries around in touches. Let's not forget it's about touches now, because these guys, they want to use them as receivers, because everybody wants Christian McCaffrey, a guy who can run out of the backfield but also catch it out of the slot as well. So they ask a lot out of the running backs, like Ryan said. They still do lean on them, but I just don't see them paying them, because these guys get injured so often, and they're getting hit by these behemoth guys, and they're going through the line, and players just aren't like they were back in the day in terms of the running back position, and like Walter Payton, the physical pounding that he took. You're just not seeing those types of backs out there anymore.
And the other thing I'll say is, you know, teams and organizations will look at what the Chiefs did last year. They didn't have a stud running back. It was running back by committee. Pacheco, Edwards-Helaire was hurt. They brought Jerick McKinnon into the fold, and they won a Super Bowl with it. So, when teams and organizations look at that, they're like, why the hell should we have a stud running back and pay him big money when we can go what the Eagles are doing now? Sanders is gone, and it's running back by committee. Even though Swift had the big game last week, I'm in agreement with Lloyd. More and more teams want the back coming out of the backfield, catching passes, doing other stuff than just running the football. And more and more organizations are going to go to the running back by committee style.
Well, again, there's going to be. I think the hitting aspect of it, and I know they're trying to make the game safer. Don't get me wrong. I understand it. With the helmets, I know the same thing too. They're trying to make it a lot better so the concussions can be less. But the hard hitting days, and in a couple games we saw yesterday, there were some cheap shots taken. I don't know why these guys continue to do so. It doesn't make any sense to me. But what's it going to take for these guys to understand and learn that either you're going to cost your team the game, you're obviously going to cost a player possibly his life at the way the rates things are going. Was it? I can't remember. I think it was Baker Mayfield yesterday, even during a Bucs game. He was 1 foot out of bounds. The other foot was already in the air, and he's already getting hit by the safety coming across. So there's a difference between obviously the hitting. For me, I would just say personally, the tackling is not the way it used to be before. I don't know what it is with these guys trying to do the one-arm grab tackle. A lot of them seem like they want to go after the ankles. And I don't know if the guys just have Crisco or oil or something else, because obviously they're slipping out of those tackles. So, Lloyd, I know the NFL is trying to do everything possibly they can do to keep it safe for the guys. But are we losing? And we talked about this on a different show, and Ryan had commentated about it. But just the simple fundamentals, are we losing that in the NFL?
Well, the physicality of the game is definitely not what it used to be. Everybody's going to bring up CTE and all the things, and they're teaching kids in high school and Pee Wee football how to tackle different. They're trying to teach this rugby style tackle because there's not as many hand injuries in rugby. And the thing is, though, too often we're seeing the helmet used as a weapon. These helmets, as you were saying, they're more scientifically better. They're more protective, but the shell is a lot harder. And sometimes the player leads with their helmet, and that leads to that butting action. Guys get knocked out. Yesterday, yeah, you did see some egregious penalties, particularly Kareem Jackson, the safety for the Denver Broncos. He had that big hit against Logan Thomas near the sidelines, and he gets ejected from the game, and he'll surely get fined. So, Angel, there's always going to be fines, and the commissioner is going to try to litigate against this. But football is a hard hitting game. It's a tackling game,
Right.
and it's physical. There's just no, unless you want to play flag football, which nobody really wants to see.
No, we saw that during a Pro Bowl, so I I'm good. I understand, the Pro Bowl. I get it. I understand these guys are getting paid millions upon millions of dollars. I know they don't want to get injured. I know they tried something different. A lot of fans liked it. I personally would like the old school way, but whatever. That's just the way the NFL changes. But Buffalo beats up on Vegas 38-10, and I guess for Josh Allen, that had to be so far, obviously early in the season, but the comeback for so far this season, because Buffalo just being home, maybe it was just the home cooking, but they manhandled the Raiders.
Yeah, and this was a situation where you kind of expected Buffalo to be angry, and you had Las Vegas coming across the country, and uh, Josh Allen came out and played like the MVP that everybody thought he would be going into this game, and it was a good quality win for the Bills, and hopefully they can build upon it. Yeah, Josh Allen, 31 of 37 for 274 yards, 3 touchdowns. And the key to me was he was not playing hero ball. He only had about 4.9 yards per attempt, so efficient with his passing. And then they had Cook go for over 100 yards in the game rushing. And then he got Diggs and Davis involved in the receiving game. So good quality win for the Bills, and they're back on track at 1-1. And we'll see how this team's able to progress from there. They're at Washington, then they have Miami, Jacksonville, then the Giants, at New England, Tampa Bay, and then at Cincinnati coming up. So, some very winnable games, and maybe they can get back on track. Sean McDermott's trying to get that defense back together and then hold it in place until Vaughn Miller comes back and some of the other players are missing.
I will repeat the rushing thing from yesterday. The Bills, 35 carries, 183 yards. The Raiders, 15 carries for 55 yards. Josh Jacob touched the ball 9 times yesterday in the run game for -2 yards. So you can't expect to win rushing the ball collectively 15 times for 55 yards. Then you put the pressure on Jimmy G, and Jimmy G does Jimmy G things when the pressure's on. So, it just played into the Bills' hands. The Bills controlled the clock. They played great defense, and it just completely took the Vegas Raiders out of it. So that'll be my theme for this past weekend, is the whole rushing thing, because, again, it's a passing league, but this league has proven if you're able to run the ball effectively, more often than not, you are going to win the football game.
Yeah, and you're able to control the clock, control the pace of the game, and go play action to your big play receivers, and just keep everything working from there. But that was a very good win for the Bills, and they needed it to get back on track. And Josh Allen was hearing all the boo birds. Maybe he'll pick it up, and we'll see how it goes.
And here's the thing, Angel. Just like I said in the Cowboys game, the Bills controlled the ball for 40 minutes in that game, and the Raiders controlled the ball less than 20. So when you have that kind of control and you keep your defense off the field and they're rested, you are more than often not going to win the football game.
So true. But we switch over to theme here from Atlanta and Green Bay, and the Dirty Birds are now up 2-0, that's incredible. And for those who are just tuning in, you guys, no, not dirty. Once again, we have to explain things because it's a different society. Not dirty as in dirty players, dirty things. Back in the day, they were called the Dirty Birds. A lot of it when Deion Sanders was there. So it's a saying. Don't read too much into it. But that being said, they're now 2-0. They allowed the Packers allowed Atlanta to come back 12 down. And so they end up winning it 25-24. Again, another hard-hitting game yesterday. And it just seemed like as the closing games are coming up yesterday in the afternoon, the fourth quarter seemed to be the theme for at least, I want to say, about 8 games yesterday? It was incredible to me to see a lot of these teams come back. But Lloyd Green Bay, which looked like they were actually going to be able to make the drive and pull it together to be able to pull the win. But Atlanta, which I don't think anybody saw Atlanta at 2-0. I thought at this point, honestly, the way they looked on paper was 0-2. But somehow or another, Atlanta has been able to stay first in the division.
Yeah, they're a surprise team, and we know 2-0 is a very good thing. Last year, there were 6 teams that started 2-0, and they all made the playoffs. So Atlanta's got a good shot as anybody, and particularly in the NFC South, which was a division that's very winnable. And it was a good game, another close game. There were 10 games that were within one score. So in this weekend so far, I know there's 2 more games to be played. But, when I look at this one, Atlanta, Desmond Ridder, once again, efficient young quarterback. We'll see if he's able to continue this pace that he set up. 19 of 32, 237 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. And getting to Ryan's point, they ran the football. Bijan Robinson, 19 rushes, 124 yards, and he showed that he's that dynamic first rounder that they wanted. They got Drake London involved again. He didn't have any catches week 1, but he had 6 catches for 67 yards and a touchdown. And then the Packers, they're also a surprise team too. I know that Love didn't throw for a lot of yards, but he did have 3 touchdowns, and it was an entertaining game between two teams that was kind of surprising.
Yeah, and Ritter was going to be one of my breakout players for this year. He never gets flustered. He's like Joe Burrow. His demeanor never changes, whether he throws a pick or whether he's playing well. But I hate to beat a dead horse. The Falcons, to Lloyd's point, they ran the ball 45 times for 211 yards. The Packers ran the ball 21 times for 84 yards. If you're running it that much and you're controlling the clock yet again, and you're running it down their throat and they can't stop it, you saw what happened to Green Bay's defense as the game went on. They just wore down. I still thought Green Bay might win the football game, but once you started to see the train rolling, Green Bay was in trouble, and Green Bay just never recovered. And you can't pin it on Love, because, again, Love didn't throw for a whole lot of yards, but he threw 3 touchdown passes. So, I mean, it looks like Jordan Love is coming into his own a little bit. We'll see what the rest of the season brings, but for the love of God, you run the ball 45 times for over 200 yards, you better win the football game.
Yeah, and they dominated the line of scrimmage, and that's what Matthews and all those big linemen that they brought in with Atlanta are trying to do. Arthur Smith, obviously, he knows that he has a young quarterback, and when you have these young quarterbacks, you don't want them throwing the ball, 35 times, 40 times. You want these guys to be efficient and then lean on the pieces around them. And Atlanta does have some nice pieces on that offense, whether it's Pitts, Drake London, and then you have Bijan Robinson, and then don't forget about Algier. Algier kind of had a quiet game. He had less than 50 yards rushing, but he's got his touches as well. So Atlanta, a team that is in contention at NFC South, and we know with Tom Brady leaving the Bucs, things are very wide open in that division.
Well, we switch over to the Dallas game, as we talked earlier about Zach Wilson, 30-10 as Dallas. I'm going to call it a semi-blowout because I think it should have been a lot bigger than that. They were being held to field goals, so the Jets defense were trying to do the best they possibly could to stop the Cowboys. But 30-10, a couple of field goals before they finally get, I believe it was one run back for a touchdown, interception for a touchdown. And you look at Zach Wilson, it was 170 yards, 12 for 27, what touchdown, 3 interceptions. Now, I will go to Ryan on it, because I said to Ryan that Zach Wilson was just having a terrible day. And according to Ryan, he said you can't put the fault completely on Zach Wilson. Last I checked, he was a quarterback. Last I checked, he's the one throwing the ball. Last I checked, he's also looking downfield. So other than that, obviously having a bad day yesterday, Dak Prescott looking pretty decent for the most part for Dallas. And Dallas defense came up big, which then puts now, of course, the Giants 1-1, Dallas 2-0. The Eagles, we haven't gotten to it yet. And then you also have the Commanders, which they should be the Redskins, but we'll keep going with the Commanders. But Ryan, I guess, what say you about the victory yesterday?
Well, Dallas's defense, dominant. I think they're the real deal. We'll see how they perform in the next couple of weeks if they can keep it up. Offensively, same old freaking Cowboys. Field goals are not going to cut it against better teams. And when they get into the red zone, it's been their MO over the last 6-7 years to kick field goals. And that is just not going to cut it. Maybe they ought to think about maybe scoring touchdowns outside of the 20-yard line, outside of the red zone. Because when they get into the red zone, it's horrible. That game probably should have been more like 49-10.
Correct.
And, I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about this team when they get into the red zone. They just cannot score touchdowns. And when you come up with some of the bigger boys on the block, that is just not going to cut it. Now, they ran the ball effectively yesterday, like we pointed out before, and the Jets just got away from the run. And, with Zach Wilson, look, they were behind. He was trying to make something happen, and, a couple of bad decisions or whatnot. But when you're playing from behind, more often than not, you're going to make mistakes. But Dallas, defense is real. Offense, So I mean, I'll throw it to Lloyd.
Yeah, well, Dallas at this point, it's they're climbing the mountain like they always seem to be in terms of, they get very high going at the beginning of the season, and around Thanksgiving they seem to peak, and when they get to the playoffs, though, however, it's a different story. So they look very good right now, 2-0. Prescott was 31 to 38, 255 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And this defense is really the story. Dallas's defense pitched a shutout in the second half. He had Micah Parsons with 4 tackles and 2 sacks. I mean, he's looking very dominant. They're trying to compare him to Lawrence Taylor at this point. We'll see. But what they did do nicely, and I don't know if it was the defense or if it was Wilson, you had the Jets were 1 of 10 on third downs. So that just shows you that this team is was not getting it done, and then Dallas was taking care of business defensively. So they're going to be a scary team going forward. Dallas tried to run the football with Pollard. He had 25 rushes for 72 yards, and that just was not getting it done. And you're right. Brandon Aubrey had 5 field goals. So, they need to score more ways other than field goals, because in the games that matter, particularly when they play these other NFC East teams, they're going to need to score more points, particularly touchdowns. So I'm real interested in terms of Dallas. They're at Philadelphia in week 9, and then they host Philadelphia in week 14. So it's going to be interesting to see how those two teams shake out against each other, because it's probably going to be them at the top of the NFC East.
All right, now we have Seattle and Detroit, which was pretty much a nail biter to the very end. Seattle winning that one 37-31 over Detroit. Detroit looked like they were in the driver's seat for a good portion of the game. And then Seattle comes back, scores a late one, and then holds off Detroit from scoring as well. And then, again, it's the tale of two tales with Detroit. Obviously, week 1, the domination was there. Week 2, they were in the game. To put it best is that they were actually in the game. Then things end up slipping away. And I think the defense is where it let it slip away, obviously, for letting Seattle score offensively on the drive. But Seattle trying to get back there to where they used to be at one point or another. Obviously, I've gone to the Super Bowl before. They're looking to get back there again. Of course, I think the big one that hurts Pete Carroll is going back against the Patriots. And then why on God's green earth would you throw a 2-yard reception for a touchdown just instead of letting Marshawn Lynch in? So that's still haunting Seattle, but they've surpassed that. They end up walking away with the win, 37-31. So, Lloyd, Seattle, how much could they end up making the
you
playoff?
bring it way back today.
Yeah.
They got to move back. They moved on from that long time. Russell Wilson's gone, and the Legion of Boom, which was really that carried that team. Those guys are, they're retired. Sherman's on TV, and when I look at Seattle, they made the playoffs last year, so a lot of people forgot that they got that last playoff spot in the NFC, and this is an efficient team. So you have Geno Smith, 32 of 41, 328 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and they played a good game, because everybody thought, okay, Detroit's coming in there beating their chest after beating Kansas City, and they just went toe to toe with them and stayed the course. The game was 14-7, Detroit at the half, and then Seattle, as you said, picked it up, and they scored 14 points in the fourth quarter, and then they got the big touchdown to win it in overtime. So this is a team that can win a variety of ways with Seattle. Kenneth Walker, yeah, they didn't rush for a lot of yards with him, but he had 17 rushes, and he did get 2 touchdowns for pay dirt. So, and they knocked out David Montgomery out of his game for the Lions. That was a big loss for them, their running back, and then that kind of just set the tone from there. So good quality win for Seattle, and we'll see if they're able to keep it going. Obviously, when you look at the NFC West, though, the Niners are the cream of the crop.
One thing about this game that stuck out to me: Detroit 3 turnovers, Seattle no turnovers. That's the difference in the game. It was nip and tuck. Normally when you win a turnover battle, more often than not you're going to win the football game. Detroit had their chances. Detroit had their chances to put them away, but 2 fumbles lost and an interception, and Seattle hung around. Seattle is a gritty football team, and in today's NFL, there is no lead that's safe. Just ask the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, and you're preaching the tenets of key football. You're talking about running football, Ryan, and you're talking about who wins their turnover battle. And usually those two things will dictate in who's winning a football game.
They will. And then you also take a look at the Baltimore Bengals game. Again, Joey Burrow comes up short, 27-24, loses by a field goal. Lamar Jackson, I believe, was 24 of 33, 237 yards, 2 touchdowns. Obviously, a mobile quarterback that can beat you in the air, he can beat you on the ground. We don't, obviously, there was that whole contract situation going on with Baltimore. That got all straightened out. There's obviously a lot of love for him still, obviously, in Baltimore. But Lloyd, week 2 now, another slow start by the Cincinnati Bengals, another slow start by Joey Burrow. Obviously, they got paid handsomely, but has this become kind of a trend? And the reason why I'll say is because in the preseason, it seems like a lot of the guys, they don't want to play in preseason. They want to wait until the 3rd game of the preseason, bring them in for maybe 2 to 3 minutes, and then save it for the regular season. So is this a part of the whole preseason nonsense?
Well, Angel, big thing, and you talk about preseason was Joe Burrow got hurt basically the first day of training camp. He was on a cart in terms of that calf injury, and it reared its head yesterday, and they're really not sure if he's going to be able to play in week 3. He's kind of banged up. I talked about last year since I was able to overcome an 0-2 start, but this is a different team. That offensive line is just not getting the job done, and Burrow's getting hit quite often, and he's looking tentative in the pocket. And Jamar Chase, in 2 games, he only has 10 catches for 70 yards. So that just kind of tells you what this team and Cincinnati's kind of regressing. And then on the other side of it, you talk about Baltimore. They have their identity. They're a tough physical team. They're, obviously, with Dobbs getting hurt, they're not going to be able to run the ball with their backs as much. But Lamar Jackson had 12 rushes for 54 yards, and then he had those 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. They got Mark Andrews back, who had a touchdown, and then he was able to hit Aguilar for a big touchdown as well in the game. So Lamar Jackson looking efficient. Obviously, he's not at that MVP level a couple years ago, but he did a very nice job, and now they're 2-0.
Baltimore Ravens, 37 rushes, 178 yards. Bengals, 15 rushes for 66 yards. The Bengals there's something going on there, and it's just not right. I can't put my finger on it. I don't know if they were believing their own hype. I don't know if it's a hangover from last year. I know the Burrow injury, but these last couple weeks, even though Burrow's had the time to heal, he just doesn't look. He looks off. He just doesn't look like himself. But at the same time, I have a Cincinnati Bengals fan that's a friend of mine, and he said, I'm really worried about the Samaje Perine. Him going to Denver is going to hurt because you had a little bit of a stable of running backs, and now they've got to lean on Joe Mixon even more. Mixon averaged 4.5 yards a carry yesterday. I think it was 13 rushes for like 59 yards, but then they got away from it. And sometimes I think, Lloyd, that they try to go to Higgins and Chase too much, and it's pick your poison with Cincinnati. Well, if we double Chase, then we got to leave one-on-one with Higgins, or if vice versa. So I just think they try to go to that well way too much.
Yeah, and Zach Taylor, when he wasn't successful a few years back, he didn't keep it simple and lean on that running game, and their offensive linemen are more run blockers, rather than pass blocking type of guys. And yes, they have a lot of weapons on that team. Boyd, Higgins, Chase. They bring Irv Smith over from the Vikings, and they could, they want to spread those targets out. But sometimes you do have to run the football. And the thing that I thought coming into this game, the Ravens were very beat up in this game. They have a lot of injuries in terms of Ronnie Stanley and a bunch of their other guys. So I thought that the Bengals would get themselves right and maybe win this one. But, the Ravens have proved their mettle.
You also have the Miami Dolphins now 2-0. The New England Patriots 0-2. Bill Belichick is not familiar with this territory, and it makes you wonder how much is left in the tank for Bill. Again, it's only the second week, so it's not like everybody's just betting the farm. Obviously, New England won't make it, but 0-2. Stats are pretty similar. 231 for Mac Jones, 249 for Tua, both having a touchdown and interception. So New England, Lloyd, this seems to be kind of their theory now, or at least their MO, where they too are starting to get a very slow start. And it's something different for Bill Belichick, where that's something that he's not used to.
Well, Angel, you know what? I think, I'm not saying the time's run out there, but, Robert Kraft, the owner, has definitely got to be looking at Belichick and seeing if, all right, is he the same guy that's won these six Super Bowls over the years? Because this team is devoid of talent, in terms of explosiveness. They just don't have anybody that scares you in terms of Mac Jones be able to get the ball in their hands. Yes, Stevenson's a nice running back. He had 15 rushes, 50 yards, and a touchdown yesterday, but there's just really not much else there in terms of players. So I think on the other side of it, you got to tip your cap to the Miami Dolphins. This team is looking like they could be a contender for that AFC East title and then make some noise in the playoffs. Tua, a guy who I've beat up kind of over the years, has been very efficient with the football. He was 21 of 30 for 70%, 249 yards. He had a touchdown and one interception. But he's getting the ball out of his hands quickly, making good decisions. And, he's got the explosive combination on the outside. Tyreek Hill kind of was quiet, 5 catches, 40 yards. But, Miami is a dangerous team. And then now they're getting their defense rolling, which was always kind of their Achilles heel. Fangio comes over there. They pressured Mac Jones 20 times. They sacked him 4 times. And Miami is a team you're definitely going to have to watch as we move forward. They have Denver this week. That's at home. Then they're at Buffalo, which is a huge game. The Giants, Carolina, at Philadelphia, and then New England again. So, some good games coming up for them, winnable games. And you may see Tua kind of get into the MVP conversation.
So the Patriots threw the ball 42 times yesterday and they rushed it 25 times. Dolphins threw the ball 30 times yesterday and they rushed it 30 times. Talk about balance. And if they get their defense going, we'll still have to see what happens with Tua because he's just one hit away from, so they could be a dangerous team as the season progresses. Obviously, everybody has to stay healthy. But, when it comes to New England, do I think Mac Jones is the answer? No. Do I think Bill Belichick's sort of blueprint for winning football games works in this day and age? No. So I don't know what'll happen. They're 0-2. We'll just have to see if this team progresses or if they regress, how they might, They need to simplify things. You can't be asking Mac Jones to throw the ball 42 times. It's not his style. That's not what he does. Can he do it? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
but
I think his style works with Brady. I
right.
think it's a chicken and egg, and I think we're seeing that maybe Brady cured a lot of things for Belichick.
And I'm just going to throw his name out there, and I know he said he'd never come back to the NFL, but just say Jim Harbaugh wins a national championship in Michigan this year. His name will come up yet again because he identifies with the players. He knows how to get the most out of everybody. And don't be too surprised if his name comes up toward the end of the year.
For who?
Yeah, there'll be a lot of money involved there. And Robert Kraft, I'm hearing, whispers that he wants to kind of turn his team over to his son in the next couple of years. And this is just not what he wants, And Belichick wants Don Shula's record. That's why he's sticking around. He wants that record of most wins in the National Football League, but it may not be in New England. It may have to be somewhere else because, quite frankly, he's the GM of that team, and he has not helped himself in terms of that roster that he's built.
Well, I think the most interesting game yesterday had to be, for me at least, was the Commanders, who are now 2-0 over the NFC East, and it's showing kind of a theme here. And then the Denver Broncos, who are now 0-2 once again, as we see that from last year. But 35-33 win, but Denver tried to make a very hard push there towards the end of the game. Obviously, the onside kick didn't work out for them as they tried to win the game. But Commanders defense obviously looking very strong this year with Ron Rivera. Your new OC coordinator as well over from KC. I mean, the Commanders, for as much as I like to goof around on them for a couple of years, but now they're finally getting the new ownership. They're getting things, they're getting a house restructured. They're getting things put in the right place. And the way they handled, I'm not going to say they manhandled, obviously, the Broncos, but the way they handled the Broncos yesterday makes you wonder, can they win the NFC East? Obviously, we haven't talked about the Eagles yet either, but Commanders looked very strong yesterday in that win, Lloyd.
Yeah, I'd firmly put them at probably number 3, even though they're 2-0, and I say the Eagles and the Giants are ahead of them, and it's a quality win for them. The Sam Howell is a guy. A lot of people had questions about him going into the season. He was 27-39, 299 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Took a lot of hits. He could run the football, and he's showing a lot of moxie out there. And then on the other side, Russell Wilson, he wasn't cooked like a lot of people said he was. He threw for over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. He had that big Hail Mary, as you talked about at the end of the game, and it was a miraculous catch. And then next thing you know, maybe they can get it done, and they go for the 2-point conversion. They couldn't get it, unfortunately. Russ also had 6 rushes, 56 yards. But I think that the big story for Denver is at one point they led this game 21-3, and when you got that big lead, you've got to get it done. Washington, when I look at them, they're built around their defense. That defense has had 4 turnovers they've caused in the last 2 games, and Deron Payne and Allen in the middle of that defense are just dominant. So this is a very scary team, Angel, and I could see them making some noise in terms of the division. They have Buffalo coming up. That's going to be a big statement game. And in a week 4, they're at Philadelphia. So we're going to find out about Washington real quickly if they're a contender or pretender.
I mean, Sam Howell got the ball to 10 different receivers yesterday. So, I mean, he was spreading the ball around. Again, no lead is safe in today's NFL. Denver got the 21-3 lead. They got a little cocky. They got a little lackadaisical. They let Washington back in the football game, and, when you have a dog backing into a corner and they start fighting back, how are you going to respond? And again, the one thing that glared out to me was Washington, no turnovers. They took care of the football. Denver had the 2 turnovers, but somebody had to win the damn game. But the way it was going back and forth. And again, you see it time and time again. When a team in the NFL gets the foot on the throat of somebody, and as soon as you let the foot off just a little bit and you start letting that team back in, then you see you could just see it steamrolling. You could just see it. You could see it yesterday when Washington cut the lead to 21-14. You could just see everything reverse. And, Sean Payton, what are you going to do now? Are you going to keep calling out your players in the public? You're going to keep calling out your defense. You're going to keep calling out your quarterback. And he did take some of the blame. But if you're going to come out in public and blame X, Y, and Z, keep that stuff in house. Do it old school. Keep that stuff in the locker room. Don't come out in front of her and say, throw everybody under the bus. So that kind of stuff doesn't float with me. I'm old school. When you have stuff going on, you keep that in the locker room.
Yeah, and let's not forget, they traded draft picks to bring in Sean Payton. So, they had to send the Saints some picks to get him, including a first rounder, and he's got to live up to that pedigree. I know a lot of people are saying it's Russell Wilson. I know he's getting older, and he's not the same guy he was in Seattle days. But, to me, when I look at that team, Sean Payton's got to do a better job in terms of just play calling and getting that team under control.
Well, we turn our focus over to Kansas City Chiefs as they beat yesterday. Obviously, Jacksonville 17-9. Jacksonville I thought maybe Jacksonville would have had an opportunity of beating the Kansas City Chiefs, But with that being said, also Pat Mahomes and a restructuring his contract, get him $210.6 million between this year up until 2036. Which then begs to differ, as I said earlier, that maybe Ryan will be looking for a new team to root for because obviously every time we see a quarterback getting paid some more money, which again, Pat Mahomes well deserved, but things do happen. But anyways, Jacksonville, Dougie P, I guess, just didn't have a good enough game plan, obviously, to beat his former mentor in Andy Reid. And KC obviously trying to look to see if they can go back, repeat again as Super Bowl champions, even though I don't like to say it so. But, obviously that's the goal for every team, but more importantly for Andy Reid's team here. So good win. I wouldn't say a complete overall solid win, but a good win over KC.
Yeah, and Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes do not lose back-to-back games quite often. Their record is, I think it's about 70% or more when they've lost a game in the following week. So it was a good win for them, a statement win. These were two playoff teams, so it's a road win for them. Mahomes, as you said, 29 of 41, 305 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. And then the Jags. Trevor Lawrence, he didn't have any touchdowns or any interceptions in this game. They couldn't get a lot going. I think having Jones back was very big for the Chiefs, and we'll see how they go from here.
That game was fugly. I mean, it was bad. I mean, I watched. It was horrendous. So, again, like Lloyd said, you saw the effect that Chris Jones has on the defense when he's there. It just frees everybody else up. And as far as the Chiefs go, offensively, you can just see they're not right. I don't know if it's because the enemy's gone, it's the effect of the enemy not being there or whatnot, but we all know Travis Kelce is 100%. But you saw the effect that he had. I mean, he did catch a touchdown pass, didn't have a huge game. But at the same time, for God's sake, KC, can you stop turning it over? They turned it over 3 times. Normally when you lose the turnover battle, you lose the game. But these are the kinds of games that you have to win as a championship football team. Jacksonville, they're still learning. They'll eventually win games like this. But, again, from what I saw, even as ugly as Kansas City has looked the last couple of weeks, the Raiders are, nah. The Broncos are and the Chargers are So the Chiefs could go 11-6 and still win this division. They're still heads above everybody else in the division. Broncos aren't impressive. The Raiders are, okay. And then the Chargers, my God. What do you do about the Chargers? But Kansas City will be fine. It's just they need to work out the kinks.
Yeah, and when you talk about the Chargers, I think Brandon Staley at the end of the season is going to be looking for a new job. That team continues to lose games that they should win. And we talk about Kansas City. I think they're just going to keep ascending. It's very early in the season. Kadarius Toney did have 5 catches, and they're going to try to spread the football around and try to find that replacement for Tyreek Hill. So it's going to be an interesting team. They have a get right game this week. They're playing the poor Bears. So I expect big numbers for the Chiefs coming out of Arrowhead this week.
All right. Well, you guys just brought up the Chargers. Obviously, end up losing that game 27-24. That should have been a win.
Yeah, well, they could say that a lot, And the Chargers, Herbert's a good young quarterback, but they blamed it on Anthony Lynn that he couldn't complete games and all that. And Herbert has 10 losses in games the Chargers have led in the fourth quarter since 2020. So that just shows you, they lose these fourth quarter leads with him. Maybe it's him. Maybe it's a defense that, Derwin James is one of the highest paid defensive safeties out there, and he's just not gotten it done. He's either injured or plays subpar. And then you have Joey Bosa, who's banged up, and this team, you talk about something just miss with them. They just can't get it done. And that was a good quality win for Tennessee at home. And Tennessee leaned on Derrick Henry. 25 rushes for 80 yards, and he had 3 catches for 15 yards. So he played well. and then Tannehill did not make the killer mistakes that he did in the first one. So good win for Tennessee. But when you talk about the Chargers, they're a team that their coach is firmly on the hot seat.
And you can see what the effect is without having Austin Eckler in the lineup. You know, so
Yeah.
they just Herbert threw the ball 41 times. They only rushed it 21. Tennessee rushed it 34 times, only passed it 24. But that's Tennessee's identity. They run the football more than they're going to pass it. Not having Eckler yesterday really, really hurt. Kelly, 13 rushes for 39 yards. It's only a 3 yards per rush. They need to keep Austin Eckler healthy, but at the same time, receiving wise, Keenan Allen went off. Mike Williams had another nice game, but it's just I don't know what it is about the Chargers, man. Ever since we go back to Phillip Rivers, you know what I mean? They just never seem to be able to put all the pieces together. And the sad part about it is they're not a bad football team. They're really not. They just don't know how to win games like this. And again, no turnovers in a football game. You never see that in a football game. There was no turnovers anywhere. It's just the Chargers just don't seem to know how to kick in that extra gear and win these types of games. And I'm going to say it here first, Lloyd. I don't think Staley makes it through the year. If they start 0-3 or even 0-4, he's done. He's gone.
They could, and they have Kellen Moore, who they brought over from the Cowboys. Future coach in waiting. Maybe they give him the position, but this is a team, as we say, they always find a way to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. And you thought maybe they'd leave that in San Diego, but they brought it right to California, and they don't really have a home stadium and everything. It's just a nondescript team, and that's a tough division, but they're firmly in the basement.
All right, we're coming up here on the hour. We're going to go into a little bit of overtime, trying to squeeze in the rest of these games here. In case you are just tuning in, we are live here. Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game. Also, right now, live in progress, Carolina's up 3-0 over New Orleans, about 8:38 or so left in the first. And we look at the next game. Obviously, Philly and Minnesota, 34-28 on the win. Once again, it just seems like a slow start for the Eagles. Defense started looking better in the second half. We talked about it last week into week one, where we see the theme here between the Eagles. Either a poor start in the first, explosive in the second, vice versa. This week happened to be just that. Very slow start in the first, picked it up in the second half of the game. But again, something that should have been a little bit better than the close game than it was now, when it was with Minnesota. And for those who saw some footage that someone tried to put out there about Minnesota and the fans when they're walking into the link and some guy getting his butt kicked, first of all, that was back on the NFC Championship game. So whoever was to put videos out there, put concurrent videos. No one from Minnesota got harassed at the link yesterday, a couple days ago. Thursday.
You said no one?
No one.
No, listen, I'm trying to do good here for Philly.
I understand.
Yeah, obviously they're going to get harassed. Okay, let me put this out there as well. Not only is it just Philly, because we see a lot of it coming from San Fran. We see it a lot coming from the West Coast teams. The Raiders still brought that same mentality over to Vegas. So when you try to put Philly into the negative spotlight all the time, actually bring the facts and put other teams in the mix as well. Because Indy, you're on the radar too.
Yeah, when you wear the opposite colors, expect to get harassed and picked on. I tell people all the time. They say, "Oh, I'm going on a road trip to wherever," and I'm like, "Oh, you better be careful certain places." I'd had some friends though that have gone to like the Eagles game in the Green Bay, and they were saying, "Oh, how nice the fans were there." So you know what I mean. So typically, though, people are going to protect their team, protect their house, and then unfortunately, you get the alcohol involved, and people get crazy. And some of the worst footage I've seen probably was in Los Angeles. the fight in the stands and all
Yeah.
that stuff, and uh, just a melee. So, but in terms of the game itself, uh, no style points. As I said last week, I've heard from a lot of Eagles people, I don't like how they won. Well, they won the game, and it was 34-28, a good solid victory for them. And yes, they started slow, and Hurts is another guy. You're like, all right, does he look like he did last year? No, he's not at that point yet, but he had 193 yards passing. He had to have one touchdown. He had to have a bad interception, sacked 4 times. He's getting hit too much, in my opinion. He rushed 12 times for 35 yards and 2 touchdowns. So they need to figure out a way for him not to run the football. But you can't talk about this game without talking about what Ryan's talked about all along. The Eagles won a turnover battle. They had 4 turnovers that they got, and they only had one against them. And then DeAndre Swift was just dynamic behind that offensive line. 28 rushes for 175 yards, both career highs, a touchdown, and then he picked up 10 first downs behind that big offensive line. So they dictated the pace of the game where they needed to. But the thing is, to me, they got to cut down on their mistakes in terms of the special teams. Today, they just got rid of Aaron Sipos, their punter, who's just not been doing a good job. He did a bad job in the Super Bowl. They bring in Brandon Mann. Maybe that'll fix that, and we'll see how this team moves forward. But good quality win for them, and unfortunately for Minnesota, Kirk Cousins continues his poor play in primetime games, and the Eagles took advantage of it. And the Eagles, you know, they're not going to worry about how pretty it was. They're just going to take that win and keep moving forward. And they're going to Tampa Bay next week on Monday Night Football.
Somebody explain to me how in the hell you only rush it 9 times in a game. The Vikings threw it up 44 times. They rushed it 9 times. Now Cousins threw 4 touchdowns, no picks, but he had 2 fumbles. They turned the ball over
Yeah.
4 times. They only lost by 6. But my God, you can't expect to run the ball 9 times and win the football game. You're too predictable. What do you think the Eagles thought the Vikings were going to do? Of course. So I don't know what's going on with the Vikings. I know Dalvin Cook is gone, but they better figure something out in the running game, because if they got to throw it 45 times a game, and I picked the Vikings to win the NFC North, but we'll have to see what happens. And Alexander Madison's getting racial threats against him and stuff like. I mean, it's just not a good scene in Minnesota right now with the whole running back situation. If they don't get it figured out, they're not going to win a lot of games.
Yeah. And I think a big thing is that offensive line. Brian O'Neill is coming off a big injury. They're a tackle, and they just, and their center was hurt. Bradbury, he didn't play in the game. And they just didn't, they couldn't move the football in terms of running it, and Madison is not Cook. He's better as a backup, than being the main guy. And they're going to have to make some changes there in Minnesota. Kevin O'Connell has some work to do. And 0-2, that's desperation time, because we know that there's only been a few teams that have come back from 0-3 to make the playoffs. I think it's 6 teams since 1980. So that shows you how long how hard it is. The Texans did it in 2018, but if you're 0-3, your season's over.
All right, 2 more games here left on the slate. We got San Fran and the LA Rams. There was a lot of hype behind this game here. San Fran be able to pull away. Brock Purdy continues to do Brock Purdy thing, 17 for 25, 206 yards. Although not a single solitary touchdown, but apparently the run game ended up obviously showing up because it was able at least enough to hold off the Rams. Rams, I guess I don't want to say they're in possibly rebuild mode, but the Rams are getting older.
Yeah, well, actually, they have 19 rookies, the most in the NFL. So their biggest problem is they have dead cap money. They have $75 million in dead cap money, and a lot of that, Angels, from what you were talking about, where they had a lot of veterans that they signed as free agents, and they got it done. They won that Super Bowl, and Kroenke's very happy. That's their owner, and McVay's looking like the genius. But now they got to get it done in a variety of ways. In terms of Stafford threw the ball way too much. 34 completions on 55 attempts. He had one touchdown and two interceptions. Puka Nacua, the rookie, he had 15 receptions on 20 targets. That was a rookie record for 15 receptions. So, this team, they're showing some moxie and some fight, but you see the disparity in these two teams because the Niners were in total control. You had Purdy, who was very efficient, throwing for 206 yards and one rushing touchdown. And then McCaffrey had 20 rushes for 116 yards and a touchdown, 159 total rushing yards for San Francisco. So they dictated pace of the game. And then defensively, they can get after anybody. Fred Warner had a great game, 11 tackles and one sack in the game. So, the Niners are a very dangerous team. And I picked them to go to the Super Bowl. And right now they're looking like a prime contender.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the Rams, you can't throw the ball 55 times and expect to win a football game. And San Francisco, great balance. They threw it 25 times, they ran it 28 times, and when you have that kind of balance offensively, and your defense is as good as it is, they did create 2 turnovers. I know it's not flashy. I know there's probably some 49er fans that probably wish it wasn't as close as it was, but these are the types of games that you have to win as a championship football team, and a W is a W no matter how you slice it.
All right. Well, you got also Tampa Bay, Chicago. Obviously, the Bears looking like the typical Bears, just not doing much of anything. Sorry to my fiance over at Studio B, but just can't get it together. And I think, and Lloyd, for me, it's the safe hire that the Bears went with. And I mean, it's for me, in my opinion, what do I know? I don't think he's just the head coach that the Bears should have gone with.
Yeah.
But Baker Mayfield looking well for Tampa Bay now, starting 2-0 for the season, and then of course hosting the Eagles coming up on Monday Night Football for next week. But Bears are looking ugly.
Yeah, and Angel, I agree with you. Matt Eberflus is a coach they brought over from the Colts, and he's a defensive guy. I don't know why they hired a defensive coach, and they're trying to build a young quarterback in Justin Fields. And Justin Fields, I always thought he was a good quarterback at Ohio State, but he's kind of just regressed in terms of NFL. He's not reading the field the way he needs to. Yes, he's a dynamic guy in terms of fantasy football and rushing the ball and everything, but he was 16 of 29, 211 yards, one touchdown, 2 interceptions, missed a lot of open throws. They got DJ Moore for him. DJ Moore did have 6 catches in the game for 104 yards, but something's amiss with them. And then when you talk about Tampa Bay, that's a good, solid home win for them. Todd Bowles, another coach on hot seat. They're getting it done. Mike Evans in particular, 6 catches on 8 targets, 171 yards, and 1 touchdown. So it'll be interesting to see that matchup coming up on Monday night where the Eagles come to Tampa, because Tampa seems like they're maybe turn a corner.
Yeah, I mean, the Bears only ran 45 offensive plays to the Buccaneers. I think when we're seeing here, they ran 68 offensive plays. And, again, you put your defense on the field that much, they're going to weigh down. Other than DJ Moore, does anybody on the Bears offense scare you? Probably not. So, I just don't think that the Bears have put enough pieces in place for Justin Fields to succeed. Great. They went out and got DJ Moore, but they don't have any stud wide receivers. I wouldn't even consider DJ Moore a stud wide receiver. Their running backs are serviceable, but they're not spectacular. And their defense is run of the mill. I mean, it's not a really good defense. So, don't be too surprised if after the year that the whole Justin Fields experiment is finished, because you saw what happened in San Francisco with Trey Lance. They sold the farm for him. It went bad and tasted sour milk, and they've moved on. So I wouldn't be too surprised if after this year that they move on from the Justin Fields thing.
All right.
Yeah, and they have a new general manager there, Ryan Poles, who may want to make a change. So, yeah.
Final game, which obviously is not underway as of yet. It will be in about 4 minutes here. Pittsburgh, Cleveland. Cleveland obviously surprising and shocking everybody last week. In week 1, Pittsburgh falling to San Fran. This is a battle of somewhat Pennsylvania and West Pennsylvania, obviously Cleveland being in Ohio. But which one, I guess, before the game starts off here, Lloyd, who wins this one?
Yeah, they don't like each other. Let's
No.
start there. And it just surprisingly, the Browns are a 2.5 point favorite in Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh has won 3 of the last 4, and Pittsburgh has won. It leads the series 78-61 and 1. So, Kenny Pickett has got to be more efficient than he was in Week 1. He's got to get that football out of his hands. He's got to find Pickens and the big thing is Johnson's going to be out with a hamstring injury. So Steelers, maybe they lean on Najee Harris more running the football. But I expect the Steelers to win this one and cover that 2.5. The over is 40. I don't know if they hit that over.
I'm going the opposite direction. I think that
Oh, wow.
Cleveland will control the game with Chubb. I think Watson just needs to not turn the ball over. Steelers, I think, are still trying to find themselves offensively an identity. I don't think they found it yet. I agree with you, Lloyd, that I think they're going to lean on Najee Harris a little bit more today. But my God, I mean, Cleveland just shut down Cincinnati. I know Pittsburgh's had Cleveland's number over the last however many decades, but I don't see it offensively for Pittsburgh. I just don't. The receivers don't scare me. Whoever wins the rushing battle today, and whoever wins the turnover margin, will win the football game. And I just don't think that Pittsburgh has enough defensively to turn Cleveland over that many times. So I'm going to go Cleveland 27, Pittsburgh 24.
Okay, short and sweet for me. I think Pittsburgh.
My X factors is the X factors. T.J. Watt. Do not forget about him.
Right.
In this game, he's going to get some pressure on the quarterback.
Yep, I agree, Lloyd. So for me, quick and sweet, 31-30. I think the Steelers take this one tonight. I think it's a bounce-back game for them. Could have been a free game for Cleveland, game 1, but we'll see. Stranger things have happened. So that being the wrap on week 2, of course, next week we'll be back here again, 7 o'clock. It will be the Monday night game, obviously, our beloved Eagles against Tampa Bay Buccaneers down here in Tampa Bay. I don't know, any last words, Lloyd, from, I guess, what it was, week 2?
Yeah, it's a crazy week, and we're starting to get that separation out we like to see. Contenders, pretenders, and there's some surprising teams out there, like you were saying, like Tampa Bay, and then conversely, you're surprised at the Chargers and the Vikings being 0-2. So it's desperation for those teams.
Ryan?
Yeah, I'll just say, what are the teams staring 0-2 in the mirror right now? What are they going to do to try and turn it around? You saw what Robert Salah did with the Jets yesterday. They were on their own 20. He knew they had to try and do something. He could see the way the game was going. He went for the fake punt. They got the first down. Now it didn't pan out. But I'm interested to see, what are the Broncos going to do? What are some of the other zero-win teams going to do to try and turn it around? I expect those teams to be a hell of a lot more aggressive this week than they were in the last couple weeks.
All right. With that being said, we thank everyone for tuning in once again to Lloyd Vance's Insider Football right here on Sports Radio 102.9 FM The Game. Also on broadstsouth.com, over our YouTube page. So many ways for you guys to hear, watch, and listen to the show. Of course, you can always end up watching a replay that is directly after the show. So with that being said, thank you to Lloyd. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for my producer over on Studio B. We hope you all have a great evening and enjoy the Monday night game.